Okay, boys and girls, here's a little chant to help you remember how to read decimal place value, decimal numbers, okay? It goes like this. A 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. Reading decimals is easy, you'll see. They have two names like you and me. First you say the name without a dot, then say the name of the less place value spot. And that's it.
Today we're going to be talking about comparing and ordering decimals, which is very similar to comparing and ordering whole numbers like we did last week. Alright, so when do you ever do that? In real life, you compare decimals all the time without even realizing it. For example, if you go to McDonald's and you go to the value menu, you're looking at your double cheeseburger and your small drink, and you're trying to see how much that's all going to cost and if you have enough money. You can order these things and see which item is more expensive and which item is less expensive. So look at this for just a second and see if you can figure out the most expensive item on the menu and the least expensive item on the menu. Got it? Let's see. Alright, first the ice cream cone was the least expensive. Did you have it? And the chicken salad was the most expensive. And you do that without even thinking about it. You always know that the dollars are worth more than your dimes and your pennies. And these didn't cost any whole dollars. You can put these ghostly zeros here to help yourself realize that there's no whole dollars. And then you look at your dimes and then your pennies, which is the same as saying your tenths and then your hundredths place. Okay, so what do I mean by comparing decimal numbers? When we compare, we use terms such as less than, greater than, and equal to. And you've been using these for the last 2 weeks now. You know that when you say less than, the smaller number is on the left, and when you say greater than, the bigger number is on the left. And equal to means the same as. Comparing decimals is similar to comparing whole numbers, and you've done this before. Okay. We've looked at place value charts a couple different ways. This is just to remind you that the bigger numbers are always to the left of the place value chart and the smaller numbers are to the right. So remember, this decimal separates whole numbers from pieces of numbers. Everything to the left is a whole number, and everything to the right is a piece of a number. And a tenth is bigger than a hundredth, and a hundredth is bigger than a thousandth. Okay, so let's look at some practices. If I ask you to compare Sarah's score with Danny's score, you're going to come over here and look at Sarah and Danny. And what the first step that we always do when we're comparing numbers, whether they're whole numbers or decimal numbers, is stack them up. We want to line them up so we can see them. We look at our tens place. Did that give us any information? No, there's 4 in both tens places. Then there's 2 in both ones places, so that doesn't help us. So then we look at the next biggest place value, which is the tenths. And which is larger, a 5 or a 1? A 5. So you know that Danny's score is greater than Sarah's score. And that's going to tell you exactly what we just talked about. Okay, you can also look at decimal numbers on a number line. On a number line, numbers to the right are greater than the numbers on the left. And on this one, since we're looking at 42 and 5/10, 42 and 5/10 is to the right of 42 and 1/10. We know that 42 and 5/10 is greater than 42 and 1/10. Equivalent decimals. And we talked about this when we were first talking about how to read and write decimal numbers. But remember that decimals that name the same number are called equivalent decimals. This is 60 hundredths and 6/10. Do you think that those are the same amount? Let's look. You might remember this picture from earlier. 60 hundredths is the same as 6/10. And I could turn this 6/10 into 60 hundredths very easily by just putting a ghostly zero here. And as soon as that ghostly zero goes up, I've broken this into 100 pieces. And I finished drawing those lines, and it would look exactly the same as this 60 hundredths. So this means that placing a zero to the right of the last digit in a decimal does not change the number. Okay? And we call those ghostly zeros. Ordering decimals. Just like we can compare whole numbers and order whole numbers, we can compare and order decimal numbers. We can order decimals from least to greatest or from greatest to least. Let's try an example. We're going to order the numbers 15, 14 and 95 hundredths, 15 and 8 tenths, and 15 and 100th from least to greatest. Always make sure that you mark least to greatest and come back and look at that every time because you will mess up if you don't. Also, when I see this whole number 15, it's a whole number, so that means it needs to be in front of the decimal. So the decimal is behind it. So when you go to line up your numbers, you can put a decimal and the ghostly zeros behind it. Okay. First we line them up, and we line them up at the decimal point. Okay. Then you can put your decimal point behind this one and add your ghostly zeros to help you not make mistakes. Oh, and it's telling you the same thing that I just did. Finally, we use the place value to compare the decimals. Always start from the left, which is where you have your bigger place values. So we start here at our tens place, and that doesn't give us any information. We look over here, and we see there's only one that's different, and it's the 4. And remember back, it said to do the least to the greatest. Okay? So I can right away see that the smallest number is going to be this one here. I'm going to put this as number 1. And I'm going to get rid of it so I don't get confused by it. Now these 5 will all be underneath the 14 and 95 hundredths. But now I have to look here. Oops. I can see that just from the 3 I was looking at, the 8 is the largest number, so that's going to be number 4. This one was number 1. And I can get rid of that. And then I have to look at these two. Doing least to greatest, this one would be number 2 because the 0 is smaller than the 1. And this one is number 3. And then always make sure, just like Mrs. Meisner taught you, rewrite them in the correct stack. So we're going to rewrite this stack. Whoops, sorry. It's rewritten here. And that matches what we did just a second ago. Okay? Now it's your turn. You're going to complete a worksheet on comparing and ordering decimals. Remember to line up the decimal numbers and line up the decimal points and stack your numbers neatly and compare from the left, where the biggest place values are, to the right. Good luck!